What are the Chiefs going to do with their major contracts? It's not just the prospects that get evaluated and worked on this week in Indy. Matt Derrick's there on the ground checking it out. We're going to get to that today on Locked On Chiefs.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Mr. Matt Derrick, editor of ChiefsDigest.com and a heckler to be named later. How are you doing in Indiana?
Doing pretty well, Ryan. So far, the only thing I've had to eat is Waffle House and some cold pasta salad from a convention center. So I need to get out and experience real Indianapolis here pretty soon.
Right. So Elmo's is on a corner somewhere. I cannot tell you exactly where it is, but hey. This is fun. I'm glad that you made it. I had intended to go and couldn't quite get there. So I'm really relieved to have one of us on the ground there because a lot got said and hinted at. And what was it? A total of 24 minutes at the podium between Andy Reid and Brett Veach. A lot to take away from that today, right?
Yeah, there are 15-minute windows, and Andy actually showed up early, so they got everything out of the way pretty quickly. But and at least the Chiefs give us an opportunity for the local reporters to be able to talk with those guys off to the side too. So get to discuss some issues that don't get discussed on the podiums and go into depth and some other things. So that is nice, and this is a different combine. I mean, at least right now the crowds are down from what they are in the past. It's a little bit different atmosphere, but you certainly get the sense that, especially from the coaches and the GMs like Andy and Brett, that they're certainly happy that there's at least some normalcy to this year, to the draft process.
I can only imagine. And I thought the questioning was pretty normal. It seemed like it was a lot of the local guys, not too many out of left field national reporters there, but you can always hold your breath. What was your biggest takeaway before I start jumping into my questions?
Well, I think the first one right off the bat was just what Andy Reid spent his first moment. I mean, he jumped into his time at the podium immediately to talk about Eric Bieniemy, the reports that there's friction between Bieniemy and Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and didn't get very far into it before he used the word fabricated, completely dismissing the reports. Later in the scrum with us, he said he didn't really know where those reports originated. But I thought it was pretty forceful, position from Andy about what he thought about the reports of friction and maybe some dysfunction in the organization. I mean, he's at this point completely dismissing it, saying that everybody works well together, that they're very happy now to have Matt Nagy in there as well, and that they're ready to roll. So I think at this point you can probably put a lot of that story behind the Chiefs.
And hey, from this point forward, you have to. So regardless of what everybody thought before, that's got to be the attitude going forward. Interesting. We talked about the Nagy acquisition yesterday, Chris and I'm interested in your take. And if you got any kind of feel from anybody down there about how the three of them, Reid, Bieniemy, Nagy, are going to be able to kind of redefine what their previous relationship was.
Yeah, I think it was interesting because, I mean, Andy, without even really, asking about it specifically, brought up continuity. And I think that's a big part of this that they do like about it is that, you lose Mike Kafka, who obviously been there the last few seasons, but now you get someone with the experience of Matt Nagy to come in here and do that position. And it's obviously he has a comfortable and working relationship with Patrick Mahomes. Certainly this would not happen if Mahomes wasn't excited about it. All those guys know each other. And yeah, I get that there's been questions and certainly maybe legitimate questions about whether the Chiefs need some outside voices or voice, new voices in the offensive workroom. But, for Andy, I think that the continuity and just having the shorthand that those guys have together and the working relationship that they have to him is important. It's a bigger deal than maybe some other things. So I still think that they're probably going to try and find a way to work in new ideas and new concepts and bring some fresh air into the offense. But for them, just having that set together again, I think for Andy is a big, big plus.
I think it should be too for the whole thing. And I keep coming back to the fact that lessons learned as a head coach often come back and make you a wiser coordinator, or in this case, quarterback coach that has obviously the continuity aspect to bring back the old, put the band back together, but has a fresh take on some of those things that I think will still allow evolution of what the offense and Patrick can do.
Yeah, I mean, not only hey, Matt Nagy had a little bit different flavor of an offense that he was running in Chicago. So there's certainly going to be things that he learned and concepts that he's picked up and things that he's expanded on that are going to be different from the last time around. But at the same time, I mean, I think you can count and rely on Matt Nagy as being a fresh voice as far as an outside perspective. He hasn't been around the last few years. So when he's looking at film, he's looking at tape, it's going to be fresh eyes, someone who hasn't seen everything before and can, and I think that he's got the relationship with Andy where he will be frank and be able to, point out where he thinks that things are right and things are wrong. That's something that, was a big part of, when he was in Kansas City, that I think that they had obviously a group to put together the offense and put together the game planning that had that collaborative process. So yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, I think that what experience that Matt picked up in Chicago absolutely should help him this second time around.
I'm looking forward to that. We're going to get into more of the details and who will be playing in this offense. A couple of question marks still to come, as well as the defensive side after I tell you about some of our pals. Football season might be over, but basketball is picking up steam, and all the pro and college hoops are going right now. March Madness is on the way as well. Lots of odds, totals, player performances, props, anything you can think of where you want to know what is the odds to lay. BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all of your sports betting action. It doesn't necessarily have to be basketball either. It can be any kind of sports, hockey, boxing, UFC, pro soccer, anything out there that you want to put some action on, you can do it. BetOnline remains the best place for all of your sports scores and podcasts and news this season, next season, and every season. Head over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action and get the news that you need to be smart about laying your odds at BetOnline, where the game starts. So a couple of pointed questions revolve around the big contract questions, as you expect they would. For me, I thought the most interesting takeaway was Veach's answer on Orlando Brown that the tag is certainly likely, as we've theorized, but it's not out of the question. Is that just covering your bases? Do you think there's really a reality where they could get a contract together for Orlando Brown?
As we talk about, hey, is there a multiverse in which it happens? Absolutely. Is it likely? I mean, out of 14 million scenarios, is it, the majority of them? No. More than probably one. But no, I mean, remember, you have until March 8th to get a deal done, or otherwise, you have to use the franchise tag. It's just part of the leverage. So that has to get done. So no, the likelihood of a deal getting done by March 8th seems unlikely, which I think is why exactly you heard Brad Veach use the word that franchise tag is likely to be used. One's more likely than the other, and the franchise tag, is more, to me, it sounds certainly more likely than a long-term deal. Although a long-term deal before the season starts, that's a different question.
Yeah, I certainly see this just only reinforced, and kudos to Brett Veach for being mostly honest in a place where he doesn't have to do that. That tag's going to come, and maybe you can still work something out on the backside of the draft or later in the summer or whatever, and pull that and do whatever you do. Organizing and negotiating in good faith can sometimes lead to some of those things. They're rare, but they happen. So that leaves me with the defensive side of the ball. And the question marks there, what was the biggest outstanding comment about some of the big questions of what they have to do in terms of moves on the defensive side?
Yeah, clearly the two biggest question marks are with Tyrann Mathieu and Frank Clark, and one of them under contract and one is not. And really the question with Tyrann Mathieu is, is there a likelihood of a deal getting done, or him testing free agency? And talking with Brett Veach, and certainly in the conversation he had with us, local reporters after the podium, he's like, at this point, Tyrann Mathieu is too close to testing free agency not to do it. So it makes too much sense at this point for him not to see what other offers are out there. And I think certainly, maybe not even between the lines, I think Brett Veach even told us, in as much as he possibly could or would tell us, that hey, there's only so high that they're willing to go and can go for Tyrann Mathieu under the salary cap pro. So I think that Brett Veach, if you parse his statements today, what he's telling us, he's certainly saying there's more money for Tyrann Mathieu out there in free agency. If he stays in Kansas City, it's not going to be because the Chiefs made him the highest offer. That deal's not coming from the Chiefs.
Yeah, and that may get him some goodwill as well. I thought Coach Reid's comments about him, about how he fits and how he's admired around the organization, I think that certainly fits in maybe trying to help ease down that number that could get a bit of a discount.
Well, and Andy said it. I mean, if it weren't for the stinking salary cap, There's a lot of all these things that they would get done. And then first and foremost would absolutely be keeping Tyrann Mathieu. But the reality of it is that's just not the case. And the Chiefs, as we talked about, are going to have that same conversation. And Brett Veach even, you grouped up several of these guys in the same, discussion. I mean, whether it's Tyrann Mathieu, whether it's Frank Clark, whether it's Traveris Ward, you can go on and on down the line. The Chiefs are going to have some very difficult decisions to make salary cap wise this offseason. It means that they can't have everything that they want. Tyrann Mathieu is probably one of those things that they can't have, even though they want him. Frank Clark is probably one of those things that at a certain price they'd like to have. But once again, I mean, it comes down to what does Frank want? What does his agents want? And if that doesn't line up with what the Chiefs want, then they're probably going to part ways there too.
See, and now you went and made the third segment the second segment. I like that. You're moving the schedule up, keeping me on track. So that's what it comes down to. Just the fact that they're saying, hey, it could still be reworked. It would have to be drastically significant. I think that is obviously preparing not just the public, but his agents for, yes, it has to be a significant, we're talking, a 33% of what it exists at kind of level from where I'm sitting. Is that the message that you took away as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with Clark, sitting at $26.3 million salary cap number. I mean, as Veach said, I mean, that's a big number. It's not something that the Chiefs can live with this year. He's got a $19 million base salary. That's how much of that cap hit is that base salary is that $19 million. And that's what's negotiable. And that's what there's going to have to be some movement on. And it's not an easy move necessarily. And, and the one thing that perhaps working in the Chiefs' favor is obviously going to be that Clark's off the field troubles will probably certainly affect his value around the league. And that might be something that keeps the Chiefs in the hunt. But yeah, I mean, certainly what we heard from Brett today, I mean, he said they're going to lay out what they see as a deal with Clark. His agents will have a deal. And if they're close enough for it to work, then a deal will get done. And if they're not, then it probably won't happen. I mean, he said it's probably still a bit of a long shot, but it's not impossible.
I envision that long shot being something like he's not going to have a market outside of this particular roster is my guess because of the legal issues. If you bring him back 6, 8, something like that, obviously a drastic discount, but would you think that there would be interest there as a designated pass rushing type of option, not an every down player, somebody that just is able to concentrate on getting to the quarterback more?
Yeah, that's what I think is interesting, because you certainly would think that there's whatever interest there is out and whatever market is out there for Frank Clark is probably going to be incentive laden. So yeah, I mean, if the Chiefs are willing to, because of the relationship with him and certainly what they have in place already, hey, if they're willing to go a little bit more on a base and and guarantee something to Frank that maybe he won't get elsewhere, maybe that makes it a little bit easier. But I can still even see in Kansas City that it's going to be pretty heavy with incentives. That if he wants to make his money, I mean, he's going to have to earn it on the field. Yep. And that would probably be a smart contract. I mean, the Chiefs, if they get production out of Frank Clark in 2022, and they have to write him a check at the end of the season, I don't think they would be opposed to that if it meant that they got a productive Frank Clark.
Yeah, I completely agree. How he produces is going to be the question. We're going to get into one topic that maybe we need to look in a different angle here coming up next. You've heard us talk about these things before. These are Built Bars, and you have to take advantage of them. The new year is rolling, whether your resolution is or not, but these things are here to help you, whether they're a meal replacement or a substitute for something that you normally would take in, maybe isn't quite as healthy for you. All you have to do is try the puffs or try the marshmallow flavors or any of these, like the coconut almond, you have the toffee almond, all kinds of options for you that taste great. They taste like a candy bar. They provide the protein that you need, 130 calories on average, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein that you need to get through the day. And they're all covered in actual real chocolate. So you get a taste of what you're looking for as well. You can replace meals. You can actually supplement meals. You can do whatever you need to get through the day. And we have a special offer for you. Go to built.com and use our code LOCKED15 to get 15% off of your order. Use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. So I think there was one intrepid reporter that was in position to ask a question about a supposed front change in this defense, thanks to the new acquisition of D-line coach Cullen. Who was that? And did that question get answered to your satisfaction?
Yes, that was one of my first questions for Andy Reid after I, asked him how his vacation was and, enjoyed his time off and everything. Just asking with Joe Cullen coming in, the coach of the defensive line, and moving Brendan Daly to linebackers. You get some experience there, working with a 3-4 defense. Is that any indication that Steve Spagnuolo was considering, making some changes there as far as the defensive front? And Andy said, no, that wasn't the reason why that they made those moves. And he certainly hinted that, hey, Steve's going to use plenty of 3-4, fronts. It's still going to be in the mix. It's going to be something that they show. It's going to be something that they do, but not necessarily a base change. I thought that, answer was interesting because I think it did indicate that while I think the Chiefs will certainly be a 4-3 defense in 22, I mean, that's what Steve Spagnuolo does. It's a recognition that, once again, that sub packages are what the NFL is these days. And just because you're a 4-3 up front doesn't mean you're in a 4-3 all the time. And the Chiefs are probably going to continue to be in 3-4 looks plenty of times. And maybe the coaching staff is an indication that mix is going to be greater going forward. But no wholesale changes on the defensive front, it sounds like.
Well, we'll knock on something because, folks, it opens up what this draft is, because there are 6 off the top of my head value in terms of pass rushers. They're going to be available 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round that actually fit the 3-4 OLB role more than they fit a down DN role. That part I find very intriguing. And so, but in order for something to do that, do you feel like who they have on contract right now on the defensive front, does that allow them enough variability to play a 3-man front more often? Or are we looking at acquisitions and maybe some draft picks that are in Indy with you right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's plenty of opportunities because, we've talked about it. I mean, there's a lot of question marks on that defensive front as far as, the guys who are even not under contract, but even some of the guys who are under contract. I mean, there's no guarantees about who's going to be back. And that was one of the things that Andy Reid addressed specifically when he was asked, as far as, is this the same kind of rebuild on the defensive line that you did last season with the offensive line, where there's going to be wholesale changes and it's a dedicated offseason to beefing up that pass rush. And even though Reid didn't want to go there, I mean, he didn't want to slight any of the other positions and said, hey, there's other things that we got to do. There's still clearly that defensive line is going to be a focus. And whether that means, I think it's certainly going to mean there's going to be new faces here. Are those free agent acquisitions? Well, you know what? I mean, it's possible. Brett Veach, indicated that they're probably not going to be big spenders early in free agency with the cap situation that they've got. So maybe they're going to be looking at some of the value opportunities that are out there amongst the veterans, maybe in the 2nd and 3rd waves. But with their draft board, the way, at least with the selections that they have, there's an opportunity to absolutely make some noise. And, day 2, especially where they've got some, 3rd round currency. And you talked about, I mean, that could be a really meaty part of the draft. And I mean, this team, I think the other thing to really consider is that there's going to be, I think, a little bit more turnover in the middle and bottom part of the roster, because you've got a lot of guys whose contracts are up and guys like Derrick Nottie and Dorian O'Daniels, that they've relied on as being rotational pieces and special teams pieces that are going to be free agents. And that means that, hey, the guys that they draft this year are going to be replacing those guys.
I think that's the way that it's got to go. I think there's a lot of opportunity to draft guys that get on the field, particularly on teams, but also in those spirals, those things that we don't see the Chiefs use that often, but are still nonetheless important on any given game day if you need to plan for a mobile quarterback, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to wrap with one other thing, because as I listen to the pressers and we know how Coach Reid is, I feel like it is now a certainty that Byron Pringle will return on a 1-year contract at the very least, because the fact that Andy Reid put Byron Pringle's name and food in the same sentence. And when Andy talks about food, I generally take that away as a positive.
Yeah, it generally is. Yeah. So when he's talking about Byron Pringle and the potato chips, that's probably a good connection. Hey, he pointed out he's a free agent. I mean, that was, kind of what you have to do in a situation like this as a coach. But no, I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, the way that the Chiefs talked about Byron Pringle, Brett Veach talked about him too today. There's a lot that the Chiefs like about the guy. And so once again, it's going to be down to cost. I mean, if there's another team out there that has fallen in love with Byron Pringle and are willing to throw a lot of money at him, that's going to make it a difficult decision for the Chiefs. But I think that's definitely one of the guys that they've developed that they're counting on and they'd like to keep around.
So if you could just let PR know that all I need them to do is to have Coach Reed and Brett Veach eat some Pringles on camera when they're on for the comment, then I'll know what's going on and I can let everybody else know. So thanks for the heads up.
Soon as you see some Chiefs videos with Pringles cans, yeah, you'll know something's up.
Well, thank you for your time. I hope that you get out and see the town a little bit, in the 4 minutes you have to spare. But thank you for getting with us and being our eyes and ears on the ground in Indy.
Always a blast, Ryan. Take care, everybody.
Have a good one, folks. Thanks for watching today. We'll be back with you tomorrow.